So hi everyone and welcome to Inner Navigation. We are finally starting. It feels like it's been such a long time coming. I have been wanting to do this for so long and I'm so grateful that there is a whole bunch of insanely highly sensitive beings who are willing to do 8 months of practice and that we are co-creating a container and we're co-creating a journey that we are really listening to each other and deepening down together and learning from each other. And I want you to know too that these practices, like they've been bubbling inside me, but I'm not recording them until we're in this container together, except the first one, obviously, which I'm doing at the moment, because I really want to be listening to your feedback because we are in this together, we are co-creating. And I also want to bring my most kind of like recent understanding to the table. So I just want to go through very, very quickly before we start. It feels really important to me to tell you a little bit about how I came up with these different types of feelers. That feels important to me. I also want to tell you a little bit about where I've been in the last 10 years and like how I've come up with the different types of feelers and how I've really started to trust these kind of unconscious waters. And I also want to go through this little tiny map, the 5 Skandhas, which some of you might have seen the other video. It's just kind of like deepening into that a little bit. And yeah, I just want to give you this little background so that you have more of a sense of where we're going, because on the Monday nights I won't have that time and I want to set this up so you have a sense of where you're going and why we would be doing that. So first of all, the feeling realm is hugely and utterly highly pathologized. And that has had such a profound impact on our understanding of ourselves and the way that we feel our feeling bodies. So we live in a culture that is very kind of pathologizing of the feeling realm. From our spiritual traditions through to our psychological traditions, we see feeling as problematic and something we need to get rid of. So in our spiritual traditions, from kind of like a lot of the traditions, we are really having it expressed through a predominantly masculine tilted consciousness. Well, we're in a masculine tilted consciousness. And it's not patriarchy. It's not kind of, masculine. It's more these qualities of our consciousness, right? So the masculine, in my understanding, are the qualities of clarity, of like uprightness, of complexity, of like the emptiness that we understand from a Buddhist perspective, say, the kind of feelings are seen as empty, that there is nothing in them, like that they're energies of existence, but it's seen very much from a masculine perspective rather than love or God or the feminine. It's kind of got this quality to it. When we're meditating, and the way that we're kind of transmitted these teachings is that the feelings are getting in the way, that they are the hindrances, the poisons, the fetters, and from other traditions, we see them as unwholesome states, things that we need to overcome, things that we need to tame. So we're swimming in a culture that reflects back to us that feelings are things to be scared of. They're quite demonized, yeah? And that if we have intense feelings, then there is something wrong with us or something we need to work really hard to get rid of. And in our psychological traditions, we are reflected back that the presence of intense feelings is bad. Either it's a disorder or it's the presence of trauma or it's like something that has gone wrong in your childhood, your attachment. Like there's just a way that we see feelings as bad. So we relate to our feeling bodies like they are a problem, and that clarity and this kind of like like incredible uprightness and all these concepts, the way that we deal with it, that's the way we relate to feelings, and that we need to be in this clarity over here, right? We need to have tamed. So for me, one of the really major things that has changed for me is my understanding of the feeling body and my understanding of the feminine. So 10 years ago, I left the traditions of somatic psychotherapy and Buddhist meditation as I understood it, and I went into psychedelics, ayahuasca. I completely threw myself into this journey of sexuality and unraveling it because it was wildly interesting to me. I was having very unusual experiences, and the Tibetan tantric practices I stumbled across, and I didn't want to follow any tradition like that. But these practices were really insanely soothing and were not working with mind in the way that I had worked in any other lineage, right? So I was concurrently doing these deep Tibetan tantric practices, somatic practices of like resting down into existence and like opening my body and going down into the feminine, right? And I was being taught the Tibetan kind of the Buddhist teachings in this very different way that did not relate to story or to vibration negatively in any way. So that was really wild. And as I was doing that, I was studying sexuality because it was profoundly interesting to me. I was having incredible tantric sexual experiences, and these practices were kind of coming to life in my body in particular ways that were just so much more illuminating and gave me so much more information than just the practices themselves. So I explored sexuality. I went and studied sexological bodywork, which at the time was absolutely terrifying to me. I thought I was going into the underworld, only to realize the depth of shame and taboo that was wrapped and strangling my being that I wasn't even aware of. So basically, at the same time of exploring these Tibetan practices, I was studying and exploring and practicing these individual practices and some relational, but not really. It was more the individual. And I noticed that I could see my unconscious material so much more intensely, right? So as I was studying like this teaching just came through to me of like, oh my God, I can take people through individual practices and relational practices in a very meditation setting, and I can help them see the presence of unconscious beliefs, which I'd been working on as a somatic psychotherapist and in my previous sort of Tibetan Buddhist understanding. But it was just like, this is like meditation and psychotherapy on steroids, right? So tantric practice is seen as a high, like a fast track, right? And the reason it's also seen as a fast track is because there are so many kind of unseen minefields in here that make this pathway a little bit treacherous, right? Because of so much shame and taboo and the way that we get so trapped in the sexuality. But somatically, what this terrain opened up was insane levels of spaciousness that were grounded by the presence of incredibly subtle and beautiful energies, right? When you took off sexuality, when you entered into practice through like relational and individual practice that allowed you to rest into essence and allowed the sensual realms to become like more open, there was a stability that I had never experienced in my meditation. Or if I did, it was at the end of 10-day retreats or a 30-day retreats or 3-month retreats, right? When I was in deep, deep practice, I had this level of stability, but suddenly I could access it like this in relational practices. And a part of me was like, what is actually going on here, you know? So, this for me is really important because I taught this for 5 years because not only did it give people this incredible container in which to like explore their inner realms, but it gave the unconscious, like the unconscious feelings and belief systems, it made them insanely visible, right? So, people who came to this with a lot of background and with a lot of meditation really understood what I was doing. But because of the shame and taboo that's wrapped around our sexuality, a lot of people came thinking it was about sex. And so for me, as a single woman, as a woman holding this space on my own, the kind of either negative projection or the expectation of sexuality was just so much, even though the majority of people really got a lot out of this. It was amazing because it's so easy for me to go into shame and that I've done something wrong. This small percentage of people that were dissatisfied or that couldn't feel the feeling realm and were just like, what are we doing? Like, why would we be looking at unconscious feelings, right? That was a bit too intense for me. So I also decided at that time that if I came back to somatic psychotherapy, there was just such a clear contract that we were working with unconscious feeling, and the relief for me was so palpable. So I came back to somatic psychotherapy, and inadvertently or unexpectedly, when people started to hit their very difficult material, I suddenly was like, huh, I'm going to use these practices that I've developed in the embodied intimacy that were about soothing and welcoming unconscious beliefs. I'm going to start to use them in individual practice. So this is how I started to like have the permission to bring in touch, to bring in sound, to bring in movement, to bring in music, and to bring in soothing. So that's kind of how it started, and I noticed that it had a profound impact on my clients. So that's kind of like where it came from. And then over the like 5 years of being steeped in the somatic psychotherapy, using these practices and doing longer immersions and like really seeing the difference of what happens when people use these practices, it's given me the confidence to go, I want to let go of psychotherapy as a structure because that structure keeps us tied to story and childhood in some way. And I wanted to come back more into practice. So, in these 10 years of hanging out at this kind of subconscious and unconscious levels of the psyche, because I dropped down from story into these feeling realms, which I'm going to give you that map for in a minute, it has become insanely clear to me that not many people can feel this level of experience. So obviously the people that stayed with me could, and the people that I loved working with could, and then within this subset of people that were attracted to my work, because if you can't feel unconscious feeling, my work is insanely boring, right? So what I noticed within the subset of highly sensitive feelers that I was working with were these different types of feelers. So I want to go through this because it feels really important to me to give you a background as to how I came up with this. But I also want to give it to you because when I express this to people and I give them this kind of map, it seems to have quite an impact on them. So the hyperfeeler, right? This particular type of feeler I'm obviously more kind of familiar with because this is my terrain, right? So this is when you are drowning in your feeling body. You feel your unworthiness, your shame, your Like you will always have this feeling that you've done something wrong. And when you have these feelings, it's so intense in the feeling body. It's like you've got the volume up on your feelings at 100% the whole time. So this type of feeling is intense in the body. When the body contracts, it's actually so tangible and visible. It literally grips, right? All the way through that central column, stomach, solar plexus, heart, throat. We are desperately trying to keep those feelings down because we feel like we're going to be overwhelmed and engulfed in them. And when we feel something like shame, we are reverberating so intensely that we can hardly stay in the body. And when we have these feelings, we have them for like extended periods of time, right? So a day, 3 days, 5 days, a week, a few weeks, right? We are literally, it's so overwhelming for us, right? So for us, learning to access space and these kind of like more relaxed waters is just an insane relief. So when I kind of help people access this, it is tangible, immediate, and these people navigate these waters very quickly, right? The problem here is because the belief of unworthiness is so strong, you're you're resting into space and learning to disidentify from the intensity of the belief that there is something fundamentally wrong with you, right? So this is the land of the hyperfeeler. This person is insanely embodied, right? Usually love sex, right? Sex is just kind of like a relief and where you get that spaciousness, right? There's a lot of embodiment. There's a lot of kind of like solidity in the structure as well. We're way more kind of like physical and down because we're literally kind of gagging on the feeling realm. Like we're polarized in the feeling realm. The other piece here is we don't have as much access to mind. So this is a lot of ADHD, the kind of non-neurotypical. And we have really thought that we're really dumb because we don't get our understanding through thinking. So unless something has a somatic quality to it, it's harder for us to understand it. So I really want to convey this because most people who are these hyperfeelers really don't think they're very like intellectual or very intelligent. They think they're shams because they feel their way through. They don't think their way through, so they think they're cheating, right? But when we can, like, so for me, like when I was studying, I'd have to feel my way through it. So I would take ages to learn because I'd be like, here's the map. But once it connected, like once the understanding connected to my felt sense, it kind of like bursts into like an awareness or an understanding that is deeply embodied. So I just want to really give that across because these are like qualities of what I've noticed in these different types of people. So then there's the sensitive analytic, which is more on the other end of the spectrum. So this person, I have a sense that when you feel your feeling body, it's somehow a little bit more intense or that the volume is even higher. So when you feel the movement of unconscious feelings, your body unconsciously kind of like closes. It either freezes or it goes towards numbness, right? But that experience of numbing is not conscious, it's not visible like the hyperfeeler. So what happens is the body has a lot of this unconscious tension and holding and it pushes the energy up. So that's like there's more tendency for dissociative states. There's more tendency to be connected to spirit. So there's an incredible high level of kind of psychic capacity or like connection to the spirit realm. But what I see more than anything is because you move away from feeling up here, then you develop insane intellectual capacity, like insane levels of it, right? Analytic. And when you move away from feeling, it goes up here, and this feels like so much better than feeling that, right? So there's just this like, this relief, but something you get so used to figuring things out with your mind. It feels really good. And because of your incredible complexity of understanding, it does feel like you could figure this out. So what I notice when I'm working with a sensitive analytic is that like it can sort of touch feeling, but it goes up and it stays up like with a feeler, if I go, oh, yeah, feel this like space, they just go vroom and down, whereas in this one stays up more. It's taken me a while to learn how to meet and work with the sensitive analytic, but what I'm really getting is this thing around pleasure, like learning, because when you feel the space of essence, when you feel that kind of like insane downregulation, some part of you gets scared of that as well. It doesn't trust that. So your sensitivity is to negative as much as it is to positive. And so there's a way that you stay in thinking without even knowing, because it's not sort of so tangible, and because you're so incredible at figuring things out. So what I see here physically, right, and again, these are brush strokes. There's nothing solid about this. There's just kind of what I've observed, and I hope I don't offend you in any way. It's just kind of helping you map out, right? When people the people on this side that are more the sensitive analytic, they have a particular body structure, right? And this is kind of from that Reich and Lowen, the character types, which I also learnt in Hakomi. So the body type here is much thinner. It draws in and up. So it also, from my experience, there's a lot more of that chronic illness and chronic tension, because it's unconscious and it's holding and bracing against the feeling realm, which it is highly sensitive to. So there is so much sensitivity in this system. It can feel things, but it's just that it stays up. So what I've understood through the Tibetan practicing lineage, right, is that our insight comes when we can stay down in the substructure of the feeling realm. So whilst you also have a lot of integration, it's like helping you stay down. The hyperfeeler is helping them have space. For you, it's like learning to have space, but you have to learn to come down to be with feeling. So that's my intention, to help you. And doing this collaboratively has been amazing. The more kind of honest I am about it, it's been phenomenal how much more helpful it is. So then the third one is the flip-flopper. So this one is a bit of this is a more interesting, a kind of later version of what I've understood. But my understanding here is the flip-flopper also has this incredible analytic capacity, a lot more like developed and like access to mind, but also has had quite a lot of that dissociative or numbing capacity, right? But there's something in their experience that they also have so much feeling, either because they came in with that, I'm not really sure, or they've actually had quite an intensity in their childhood that, due to that like intense childhood experience, something as they get into their 20s and 30s starts to crack through. The numbness can't keep it down. So either because of intensity in their childhood, like really kind of intense trauma events, right? Or because of adverse effects in their adult life, or because of the chronic illness, right? Something about that numbness, the trauma or the feeling body really starts to break through. And when the feeling body breaks through, they look like the hyperfeeler. It's super intense, incredibly intense. But this flip-flopper, because of this capacity, once the kind of intensity has gone down, they can put themselves back together. They can rest into mind and rest into that numbness. So what I've noticed when I work with the flip-flopper is, again, the hyperfeeler, when I get them into body, they just kind of stay down into body. Whereas in the flip-flopper and the sensitive analytic, they keep going up. So one of the ways I'm working with you more is to actually have a very felt sense of when you're in mind and to start to feel what that feels like. Because the benefit of being highly sensitive feelers, right, is that we can actually feel the vibrational tone of the feeling realm, right? And this is really important because we can actually feel when we're in essence. We can feel the dark feminine waters. We can feel the kind of wholeness, the goodness, the gravity that is missing in our masculine consciousness, right? We've lost connection to the feeling body. And as highly sensitive feelers, we can feel it. It's just that we have to learn to navigate it because it's quite treacherous terrain, because we've absorbed that there's something wrong with feelings. The sensitive analytic's a little bit different. This is a different realm unless they've kind of cracked through. These people have like incredible minds, incredible psychotherapy trainers, or like really kind of complex, not complex, but really accomplished practitioners. So there's more confidence I see over here in the sensitive analytic that stays in sensitive analytic. A lot more of kind of like unworthiness over here in the hyper feeler. And in the flip flopper, it varies. It depends where you are along that spectrum, whether you're more towards the kind of hyper feeler or more towards the sensitive analytic. So I hope that that's really helpful. And now I just want to go through this map with you. I know that this is taking up a little bit of time, but it just feels really important as we embark on 8 months of practice that you have a sense of what you're doing and a sense of how you might be working with this body, right? So this wonderful map of the 5 skandhas, very interesting. When I got taught this in the masculine tradition of Theravada Buddhism, it was extremely useful and it did give me a very solid sense of impermanence and egolessness. It really helped me see construction of identity, and it really, I think, kind of dislodged a lot of my sense of kind of Lorella and just working on Lorella in this life, right? So it was really, really useful, but it never gave me a sense of being able to recognize which skandha I was in. And it absolutely and utterly did not give me a good relationship to feeling, right? In the more kind of masculine tradition, even though it has this understanding of emptiness around feeling, its kind of attitude towards feeling is and emotion is that it's bad, that it is a problem, that it is a poison, that it is, it's what we want to overcome. When I got taught this in the Tibetan tantric practicing lineage, like this was feminine, it was vibrational, and it was really about learning how to rest so deeply into the body that we could start to make so much room for the unconscious feelings that are actually quite intense, and that without making room, we can't meet this layer of experience. So I want to illustrate this map. I want to put images to it. I want to just go through it a little bit slowly because this is super important, right? We can start to know where we are in ourselves through this map and whether we are actually meeting the vibrational realm of feeling. So the first skandha is a skandha of contact. Really interesting here because contact is where our 6 senses, right? So that's our 5 senses plus the sense of thinking. It's where our 6 senses make contact with the so-called outside world, right? And so it's where there is this contact, there is the arising of form. It is a co-arising of our senses and experience, right? The second skandha is the skandha of feeling, and this is how I use the word feeling, right? Feeling comes from the senses, right? And it is an arising of sensation and vibration. It is energy. And this is the way we know we're down here is this vibration sensation is pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, right? And that's the way we start to enter into it. So contact and feeling are in the unconscious. They are happening without our awareness. And it's like we can't do anything about them, but the way that we meet them really changes everything. So the third skandha is the skandha of perception. So here it's like, again, how I was taught this is the way that you know that you're in this skandha is because there is a sense of, is this threatening or non-threatening? Is it safe or is it unsafe? You know, is there an opening? Is there a contraction? So it's a very basic level of perception, right? It's just a basic pigeonholing. So here, this is in the subconscious. We're kind of aware of it. The others are in the unconscious. So from here we move into formation, right? And this is where we branch out into our very habitual grooves, right? Formation is in consciousness. This is where our history is overlaid onto the present moment experience. Like it's already starting in perception and then it branches out into very habitual grooves of how we receive and like meet and perceive our experience and how we respond. So I'm just going to give you a little example of what this might look like in action, right? So let's just say you walk into a party and you have this feeling that's unpleasant arise. You might sort of have an initial kind of assessment of that, of like, this is unsafe, I'm not welcome here, right? So you might go down one of your very many and habitual grooves in response to particular sensation. So you might go down a feeling of collapse, right? Or you might feel this feeling and go straight into people pleasing and see if you can make it safe so that that feeling goes away. Make people like you, you know. Or you might go more into a bit of a freeze without even realizing. Or you might go into like a super cool, like I don't really care, I don't like these people anyway, and kind of block that feeling in your body so that you don't even notice it. Or that feeling might literally just pick you up and make you walk out the door before you even realize, right? So that's kind of like just a sense of what it feels like when you're in this particular skandha. So when we're here, we are really overlaying our past experiences onto the present moment. This is the land of memory. This is the land of recreation. And this is the land of like really being able to label and name things. So if you are having an experience and you know what that feeling is and you can put a memory to it, you are not in the unconscious. You are in the land of formation. And this is extremely important, right? Because when we do therapy, even when we do somatic psychotherapy, we are feeling into feelings. And as we feel into feelings, we come down from story, we feel into feelings, we notice what they are in our bodies, and it kind of illuminates memories or it makes sense of our experience. This helps us make meaning. This helps us make connections. This helps us understand what we are doing, right? This is like really useful. For people who can't feel their feelings, this is insanely useful. And even for us, like as we came down to make sense, it's useful, right? But it is a stage and we get really stuck in this stage. Not only do we get stuck in the stage of trying to figure it out, but we're trying to relate it to our childhood and we're trying to feel the root cause in our childhood, right? So for me, the really important thing is when you are feeling into your feelings, if you know what you are being with, then you know you're in the skandha of formation, right? You know you're not in the substructure of your experience that is actually animating and recreating your belief or you're overlaying your perception onto these energies. We want to come down to meet these energies that we have unconsciously been moving away from our whole lives, maybe even before we came into this life. So the fifth skandha is the skandha of consciousness. And this skandha kind of basically, this is an overarching skandha. It basically pulls together the other four skandhas and gives us an insane sense of this is actually what is happening, right? So this is when you're emphatically in absolute truth of what you know is happening. Like, I can feel this. You said that. You made me feel this. You did that. I feel like this. This is actually what is going on. Or in a more kind of inner sort of self-critical way, it's like, oh my God, I said that. I can't believe it. They're not going to like me. I'm so worthless. Like, there's an intensity to this experience. It is so solid, it's so full on, and it's very narrowing. So this is a great way to recognize, oh, I'm in something. When you have that level of emphatic, that level of that person's definitely fucking, they're the problem, right? You know you're in the fifth skandha, right? And then you drop down to what's the themes, what's the feeling, and then you drop down even further into like, oh yeah, what is, this doesn't feel, this feels unsafe. And then, okay, what's the vibration and sensation that I'm moving away from? So the whole of inner navigation is working in the feeling realm, right? So I'm helping you learn how to come down, how to recognize when you're in a state. So this is really important. And the thing that I mentioned before of like, not everybody can feel this level of experience, right? This is so important because we are comparing ourselves to the people who can't feel and thinking that they've got their shit together. Look how together they are. They don't feel their worthlessness. They don't feel their shame. They've obviously done better work, or I'm so much more traumatized, right? It's because they may not be feeling the feeling realm, right? And that is very different. So people behave very differently when they don't feel the feeling realm. And then we live in a consciousness that completely pathologizes anyone who can feel their feeling realm. So this doesn't feel particularly good, especially to the hyperfeeler and the flip-flopper, right? To the sensitive analytic, it's very different. It's a very different kind of organization. But you learning, like your sensitivity is there, and you learning to come down from mind. It's actually learning to feel the safeness of these feminine waters. The feminine waters feel very, very, very different. We have to learn to hang out at this level of non-knowing, right? So for me, the feminine waters are hanging out in the deep unconscious, learning how to feel safe down here. And it is insanely down regulating. It's insanely restorative. But we have to learn how to feel safe down here because we're not used to feeling this relaxed. We're not used to taking in the pleasantness of this experience and learning to let our bodies actually let go, right? So we have to train to take in the nourishment. We have to train to not have any idea what we're doing and to feel comfortable in that, right? Keep meeting your feeling as pathology, if you keep looking at it like it's a problem, if you keep relating it to your childhood, if you keep relating to it as like trauma, it responds like trauma. It literally braces against a consciousness that is misperceiving it. And when it braces and it's kind of not met and it's not happening, it's not working, then for us, it actually feels like, oh, that actually, validates the fact that it is trauma. So we're actually lost in this little cycling loop. When you meet feeling as something that you actually like, you want to welcome, you drop the story of what you think you're meeting, you actually open up to its sacredness, you soothe it, you welcome it, you kind of like bow down before it and say, oh my God, I know I'm misperceiving you. I know I'm scared of you. I really want to learn to meet you. It responds completely differently. Like, this is where I see this is when I know people are actually in contact with the unconscious realms, because there's very particular way it responds, and it is so incredibly sweet, right? As highly sensitive feelers, if we feel into our feelings, if we place our attention into our feelings, it's like pouring petrol onto a fire. It actually increases the volume and the bracing. In the Skandhas, there's actually a thirst. If you place attention into feeling consciously or unconsciously, you are pulled into that vortex, into habitual perception and formation. So we are totally navigating completely different waters. It's paradoxical, it's completely opposite. As we place our attention into the calm and into these waters, and we start to meet our feeling as vibration, we start to meet it out of the corner of our eyes, we start to meet it at like 5% or 10% of its volume, because we are actually receiving it in the whole ocean of our being, then we start to get completely different information, and we start to experience it as new. We are meeting the present moment of this vibration, and our body isn't rejecting it, it's not pushing it away, and it's not being pulled into what it believes it is. And really, what are these energies that are co-arising in our bodies? Like, we keep meeting the feelings like they are us. We keep meeting them and judging them and wishing they were gone. So we are fighting our present moment experience, and that fight creates tension. You know, we've even got these traditions of epigenetics that are saying to us we come in with encoding from our forefathers, you know. They call it trauma. But, you know, if we look at eye color and hair color and skin tone, like, I can feel the lineage of my mother and her mother, highly sensitive feelers, right? Manifesting very differently in the world. But this comes through how much of it was I born with. Yes, I had a very intense childhood, but I reckon I was like this, you know, as I came in. You know, there's a neuroscience that says we are born with 400 pre-established psychological traits, right? And there's Buddhist maps that say not only are we born with a sense, like we come into this like existence with a sense of separateness. When you hang out at the feeling realm, that's really important. And the second Adana says we come in with imprints in our consciousness, right? These imprints that move towards and away from feeling, we come in with them. This is, again, like, this terrain is like you can only explore it experientially. But it's really important for us to loosen the grip around the story, around the kind of solidity of what we think we're meeting, and to start to drop down into the feeling realm, away from the land of formation, away from the recreation. It feels very, very different down here in the feeling realm. I know it's a long video. I tried. It feels really important just to get this out there. I'm going to be coming back here all the time, but I kind of want to give you a sense of hanging out down here. This is the feminine. This is very different, and a different and unexplored energy in ourselves, right? And meeting these energies that we are bracing against, or that we're kind of falling into, but like learning to let these energies just move through us and learning to rest into our essence are probably the two main things for me. So knowing why you're doing that. So I'm going to revisit all of this lots of times, but I hope this has been beneficial. And again, I hope you don't get too caught up in the different types of feelers, and whether, you know, where you are and if it's right or wrong or what's better or wrong. I don't see it like that, you know. It's just that hopefully me reflecting to you like what I see will help you disidentify from the individual way that you have pathologized your experience, or help you meet it a bit differently. And I hope that that's really beautiful and supportive. But most of all, I want to invite you. We are going to be doing these practices so lazily so that you taste this, right? You taste this feeling of letting go and being held by existence. It can be in the deep, deep sea. It can be in deep, deep, deep space. But what we know is it has this quality of kind of gravity and magnetic quality down that is restorative. Anyway, leaving it there. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm so looking forward to this journey. Okay, bye.